Right, this Skype presentation is now being recorded. We'll have Chappy Doug's microphone on, my microphone on, Tony's microphone on, and Bernadette's also standing by. For housekeeping purposes, we've asked that students who are not using their iPads now, please turn them to airplane mode. That'll prevent the traffic on the network from dropping out. I have my phone off the hook here. I've got my mobile phone on silent. We've minimised the videos so we can't see faces except for those presenters. We've also turned microphones to mute because we are endeavouring to take this particular recording and place it onto probably YouTube and our school YouTube channel later today. While I'm talking, it's a good opportunity for you to check your audio settings. What we'll be doing is we'll be playing obviously the songs that we regularly play at our ANZAC Day ceremonies, the anthems. Chappy will be playing shortly. So I'd like to now ask Chappy Doug just to strum quietly while we're waiting to commence, and if you can just make sure that the sound is at an appropriate level in your room. Thanks, Chappy. Chappie, thank you for playing. I'm just going to ask, just before we launch into your song, before we commence, just if Mrs. Robinson can just do a check-in, if we can see your video and or hear you, Tony.
Okay, just turning my microphone on, doing a microphone check and a video check.
Great. Video check is great and sound check is great. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, so Tony and our guests who are listening so far, Chappie's just going to continue playing right up until 10 a.m. He is going to do a little song to, I guess, introduce the ANZAC ceremony. So we'll go back to you, Chappie. Thank you until 10 a.m.
All right. Would you like me to play I'm Australian Now, Pip, or keep playing some instrumental?
No, I think we're ready, Chappie. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. I came from dreamy time, from the dusty red soil plains. I am the ancient heart, the keeper of the flame. I stood upon the rocky shores, I watched the torches come. For 40,000 years I've been the first to stray. We are one, we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come. We share the dream, and we sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australia. Oh, we are one, but we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come. We'll share the dream and sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australia.
Thank you, Chappie Doug, for entertaining us in this very special occasion online today for our 2020 ANZAC Day service. Before we commence, for those of you who have just come in, we are recording this session. We have everyone's videos on mute. We have microphones on mute. And we'll be recording this and sending it out hopefully on our YouTube channel later today. So Chappie has now concluded his song for the time being, and he'll be back a little later. I'll turn my screen off because I'll be managing a couple of things, and you don't need to see my head moving from side to side, but you will hear me throughout this presentation. Well, welcome everybody to our ANZAC Day service for 2020 online. I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Yugambeh speaking people and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and hopes of Indigenous people from this area. I would like to acknowledge the important role that these custodians play in maintaining and ensuring gathering places for the young of Elanora. Well, good morning staff, students and families. Welcome to our online 2020 ANZAC Day service. This morning is a very special occasion where we come together to remember the men and the women who fought and gave their lives in many arenas of conflict in the history of Australia and New Zealand. And as members of our school community, whether you are far away at home in your lounge rooms or here at school, we come to honour and remember the ANZACs and all the men and women who have fought for us, our country, and so we can be free. We acknowledge the role of all the soldiers, including the Indigenous soldiers, and remember with respect their sacrifice. We understand the sadness and the loss felt by family members and friends. And throughout this ceremony, whilst we can't be together in person in the Performing Arts Centre, look carefully at those images, listen to the musical pieces as they remind us of the sadness and horror of war. And even though our special guests from the RSL and our various clubs cannot be with us this morning, I wish to acknowledge their valuable contribution over the years to our school ANZAC Day ceremonies. I would now like to ask Mrs. Robinson to speak with us on this very special occasion. Please welcome Mrs. Robinson.
Good morning, everyone. ANZAC Day is a part of our history. We honour this day to show our respect and our gratitude for the people who served in wars to defend our country. This year, we are making new history. We are struggling to defeat the coronavirus, and our doctors and nurses and our essential workers are on the front lines to care for everyone. We are all working together to keep ourselves and our communities safe. No one likes this situation and no one likes these sacrifices, but we're all doing what we have to do, and we're doing it as a team across Queensland, across Australia, and across the world. Let us all use today's history to give us a better understanding and a better appreciation of what the ANZACs did for us. They made great sacrifices so that we could enjoy our freedom. Let us always remember how we value our freedom and how important it is to us. Our ANZACs gave us our freedom and showed us how to be brave and how to look after our mates. They gave us our lives and our future. We will always be grateful and always treasure our freedom, lest we forget.
Thank you, Tony, for being able to present your speech online this morning. Usually our student leaders would read these stories of the ANZACs, but this morning it's going to be me. So I'd like to read this on behalf of all of our school captains who would have ordinarily been doing this. Just before dawn on the 25th of April 1915, during the First World War, a group of Australian and New Zealand soldiers were wading ashore to a small beach on the Gallipoli Peninsula in Turkey. They were members of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, and they called themselves ANZACs. Many of these men were only teenagers, some as young as 16. The Australian nation was only 14 years old, and all were anxious to prove that, as volunteer soldiers of their new nation, they were courageous and determined. On landing at what is now known as ANZAC Cove, those ANZACs were faced with steep cliffs from which the Turkish enemy had a dominant position. The ANZACs were sitting ducks. Many died during those first landings, but with extra troops sent in, the ANZACs managed to stay for 8 months, during which 36,000 Australian and New Zealand soldiers were killed or wounded. The battle was not won by the ANZACs, but they did endure as best they could before being evacuated. In that terrible ordeal, young Australian soldiers earned a reputation for courage, self-reliance and mateship. The terrible Gallipoli experience drew Australians together as a nation and established an Australian character. This has developed into what has been known as the ANZAC spirit. That spirit has been the driving force behind all Australian servicemen and women ever since. It set standards for all the soldiers, sailors and airmen and women who followed them in the First World War and all the wars since, including World War II, Korea, Malaysia, Borneo, Vietnam, Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as peacekeeping missions throughout the world, including our neighbours in East Timor, the Solomon Islands and Bougainville. Some say it showed the world that the Australian military deserved respect. And this is why Australians come together every ANZAC Day. We do it to remember and respect the ANZACs for their achievements and sacrifices. We should remember them as the young Australians they were in 1915. And all of this happened long before most of us were born. The Australian characteristics developed at Gallipoli were courage, self-reliance, mateship. They must never be forgotten or taken for granted, and we need to reinforce them in our everyday lives, no more so now than now. This is the spirit of the ANZAC, handed down over the years from one generation to the next, and now to us. And for the sake of the future of this great country, we need to carry the spirit of ANZACs with us as we continue the task of building a better Australia for our future. Time has passed, and those original veterans who survived Gallipoli have passed away, and even the number of World War II veterans who march on ANZAC Day has reduced dramatically, and in time all veterans of more recent wars will no longer march. We must take the time each year, we must take the time each year at occasions like this to remember the sacrifices of all men and women who have served our country in times of war. Now, at this time of our presentation in the pack, we would have had our senior choir and Mrs. Chetty and Miss Chris performing In Flanders Fields. So I'm going to play this now for you. The lyrics are on the screen and you'll be able to listen in.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below, we are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt old, saw sunset low, loved and were loved, and now we love. In Flanders fields, in Flanders fields, and now we love. In Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing lands we row. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us to die, we shall not see the poppies grow. In Flanders fields, in Flanders fields, we shall not see the poppies grow. In Flanders fields, in Flanders
Thank you to Mrs. Chetty for providing that. I'm not sure, I had a message from Mrs. Chetty in the middle of that said we couldn't see the lyrics. I'm not sure what happened there, but that's okay. Hopefully you'll be able to read the prayer of remembrance on the screen now along with me. So please bow your heads. Today we remember with thanksgiving those who made the supreme sacrifice for us in time of war. We pray that the offering of their lives may not have been in vain. Today we dedicate ourselves to the cause of justice, freedom and peace, and for the wisdom and strength to build a better world. Amen. Our next slide is something that's very, very dear to our hearts. Some years ago, one of our teachers who used to teach in the upper school, Mrs. Andrea Grigg, composed a very special song. It's called Lest We Forget. I know many of you know it because we've sung it for many years, and it's a traditional song that we sing every year at our ANZAC ceremony. Now, just to let you know, we've had some technical issues where the YouTube clip won't play over the over the Skype, so I'm going to press play on the screen, but I'm also going to play it externally, so the syncing might be just slightly different, so bear with me.
Lest we forget why we are free, we will remember and live our lives in peace. They won't grow old as we grow old, nor grow weary through the years. When the sun goes down and in the morning, we will remember what they've done. So many stories to be told, so many memories to be shared. We'll never know the hardships they endure. This day will gather in respect. Lest we forget the men who fought to free our land and give us hope. Lest we forget why we are free, we will remember and live our lives in peace. Lest we forget the men who fought to free our land and give us hope. Lest we forget why we are free, we will remember and live our lives in
So teachers, probably what you saw there was a still image from that YouTube clip because I had to have my microphone unmuted. When we sent the email out to all the families yesterday, it does have that YouTube link to this particular song, so it's probably a nice thing to be able to play it in full with the images at the end of this presentation. So this would be the time in our ceremony where we would be laying the wreaths. We'd have Chappy Doug playing and our special guests and our student leaders and people in the audience and families from home would have brought in flowers. And today we've made some flowers into wreaths and bouquets, and they'll be taken to the flagpole after this particular ceremony. But for now, I'm going to go through the formal part of this next section. First, you will hear the last post. Then we will have 1 minute's silence, and then we will have the rouse. Now, sometimes it's called Reveille. At the dawn service, it's Reveille, but normally it's the rouse, which is a shorter version, which is what you will hear today. I will recite the ode at the end, and then I'd like everyone to repeat the line, "We will remember them." It should be on the screen. Following that, we will have the national anthem of New Zealand and then the anthem of Australia, which will firstly be in Yugambeh and then it will be in our regular English. However, we don't have the lyrics for that. So it would be nice if students could listen along and sing and show respect by standing during that time or sitting very, very quietly, depending on where you are. So I'd like now everyone to just listen very quietly as we start the last post. Please bow your heads for 1 minute's silence. The Ode. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them. We will now have the New Zealand National Anthem. you to Mrs. Chetty particularly for providing me with a lot of the backing tracks and being my support over those last few songs with volume via text. We're able to do everything. And now it's time to ask Chappie Doug back so that he can play one of our favourite songs. The band played Waltzing Matilda. So Chappie, are you there? Are you ready to come back on?
I am ready. Can you hear me okay?
So while Chappie's getting ready, the lyrics of this song will remind us of the many soldiers who lost their lives or returned from the war badly wounded. Thank you, Chappie Doug.
You're welcome. When I was a young man, I carried me back. I lived the free life of a drover. From the Murray's green basin to the dusty outback, I waltzed my Matilda all over. Then in 1915, my country said, son, it's time you stop rambling, there's work to be done. They gave me a tin hat, they gave me a gun, they sent me away to the war. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as I sailed away from the quay. Amidst all the tears, the shouts and the cheers, we sailed off to Gallipoli. How well I remember that terrible day when the blood stained the sand and the water, and how in the head they called to the bay, we were butchered like lambs at the slaughter. Johnny Turkey was ready and he primed himself well. He showered us with bullets and he rained us with shells. In 5 minutes flat, well, it burned them to hell. Nearly blew them right back to Australia. And the band played Waltzing Matilda as we stopped to bury our slain. We buried ours, and the Turks buried theirs. Then it started all over again. Now every April I sit on my porch, I watch the parade pass before me. I see my old comrades, how proudly they march, reliving their dreams and past glories. I see the old men, they're all twisted and torn, forgotten heroes from a forgotten war. And the young people ask me, what are they marching for? And I ask myself the same question. And the band played Waltzing Matilda, and the old men still answer the call. Year after year, more old blokes disappear. Someday no one will march there at all.
Thank you so much, Chappie Doug. We just so appreciate you being able to bring those songs to us today.
Thank you.
Well, everybody, this concludes our ANZAC ceremony online, but I have a few messages for you and a few words of thanks before we go. Tomorrow will be a very different ANZAC day. While we cannot attend the dawn service or represent Elanora in the midday march, we can all wake up really early. From around 5:45, we're going to be able to stand in our driveways at dawn with our families and all of the families across Australia. Some of you may have torches and some of you may have Australian flags. You might want to wear your family's medals with pride. Take a sprig of rosemary from the garden for remembrance and show your support for all of our Australian and New Zealand servicemen, women and animals who have bravely represented our nations in the past through to the present day. And we're going to be thinking especially of all of those veterans who are unable to march tomorrow morning. I'd like to thank Chappie Doug for playing for this morning. I'd also like to thank Delia Chetty because she's been my right-hand sound check, not only today throughout the service on her texts, but for the last few days. I think Paul and Houston absolutely need a huge round of thanks. The gardens around the memorial, around the flagpole, and not only that, but around the whole school are exceptional, and I really, really am so thankful for the way they've prepared the area for us today. The office staff have been very, very helpful in getting this up and running, and also to the teachers for your support. So what we'd like to do very shortly is, if we can ask that, I'd like Noah Puddy and Audrey Benson to come and to raise the flag for us. But I was thinking throughout this presentation that as this is the last ANZAC service for our Year 6 students, and we only have a few of you here today, I think that the Grade 6 students should be able to come down to the cul-de-sac after this presentation, and we have floral tributes that we are going to take out to the flagpole. I'd like to just let the staff know that we have Social Club is shouting some nice ANZAC Day biscuit slice and scones for you, so you can go and collect your little ANZAC treat from Anita in the tuck shop. And I'd also just like to thank the families for their support. We sent home that PowerPoint yesterday, the slides, and have had a lot of feedback, so I hope they're enjoying the ABC of ANZAC Day and some of the other stories at home. I'd just like to see if Mrs. Robinson would like to have a farewell message before we conclude and stop the recording today. Mrs. Robinson?
Thank you, Mrs. Strasnick, and a big thanks to you for all your work in making sure that our ANZAC ceremony went ahead regardless of our difficult circumstances this year. Boys and girls, I just want you to really remember this ANZAC Day. We are making history. You will remember this ANZAC Day. You will remember standing in your driveway at dawn, and you'll probably remember that for your entire life, because hopefully it's the only ANZAC Day where you won't be able to celebrate as we normally do and commemorate all those things in the past. So really understand how important this day tomorrow is in history, and keep it in your memory because it is special in itself. Thank you very much for your respectful observance of this ceremony, and well done everyone.
Thank you, Mrs. Robinson. As mentioned before, if the Year 6 students who are here today could come quietly down to the cul-de-sac with their supervising teachers, and we will take the floral tributes out. And I know Mrs. Robinson already has done a video message which has gone home to our families on Facebook, but we'll take some photos of the students and Mrs. Robinson at the flagpole with those tributes very shortly, and the Australian flag will now be raised to full mast. Thank you everyone for your participation today. I'm going to conclude the recording and sign off for now. Thank you.